Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today as we speak about something that I think is going to be extremely informative for next year moving into 2022. We have two panelists here that know the stuff inside and out. Super excited to introduce them and get their thoughts on this topic. But what we're speaking about today is 2021's hidden sales problem. Okay, we're going to go through this playbook will help 2 to 5x your pipeline. Okay, so who doesn't want that to happen? So this is going to be a fantastic conversation. It's going to gear us up really well to knock 2022 out of the park. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our fantastic two panelists, Ashley and Abby. Thank you both so much for taking the time in your day to bless us with your knowledge. Very excited to have you here today.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will share my screen here. Apologies, guys. Alrighty. All right, Mikey, we'll pass it back over to you. Get us introduced here.
Hey guys, so we're going to dive right into it. Ashley Rowland, account executive from Chronologic. Thank you, Ashley, so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Can you just give us a bit of background on yourself, who you are, and just so we get a bit more acquainted with you?
Yeah, definitely. So Ashley Rowland, account executive here at Chronologic. I've had the pleasure of working in the sales engagement space for the past few years, and I know how important it is to stay present with the latest trends of success, and not only in the sales world, but also basically any customer-facing role, and just keeping up with it all.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ashley. Super excited to hear what you have to say. Abby Orlowski from Chronologic, Director of Marketing. Thank you so much for being here. Really excited to hear what you have to say as well, but please just give us a bit of a background on yourself so we can get a bit more acquainted.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mikey. Super excited to be here as well. Thank you guys, as Mikey mentioned, so much for joining us and spending this hour with us. So I oversee our account-based marketing and demand generation here at Chronologic. Super passionate about sales and marketing alignment, and really excited to dive into this discussion. As Mikey mentioned, we'd love for this to be an interactive session, so strongly encourage you guys to jump in, ask questions, give your 2 cents on any of the topics that we're presenting. We'd love to hear from you, and so awesome to see so many great folks joining us from a lot of different organizations, and it looks like all over the world. So yeah, excited to dive in. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, Ashley, you want to kick us off here?
Definitely. Cool. So I think we can all kind of agree that 2021 was a pretty solid year in terms of figuring out what the new norm is in the world of sales. 2020 was a time of confusion. People were really unsure of what the new norm would look like. Everyone was kind of panicking in their own way and at different times. But luckily, we're past that confusion stage for the most part. So we've been really able to evaluate a lot this year, especially when it comes to prepping for more revenue in 2022. I have personal experience of not only being an AE, but also being an SDR and working with current customers. So kind of the full sales cycle, and working with a lot of my customers, I'd hear a lot of challenges. So what are the 2021 challenges that are associated with the traditional playbook that we've seen lose revenue, and what are the things we need to fix for 2022? First, SDR teams are spending all their time lead chasing, and they have way too many things to prioritize, and things slip through the cracks. And then the leads that are qualified and hold a conversation with an AE, then those leads may fall and slip through the cracks because they're focused on their actual closing deals. Mm-hmm. Then we have, were you going to say something?
No, sorry, go ahead. I was just agreeing all that.
I was like, what? Then we have all the automated emails that are lost amongst the sea of all other automated emails from all the SDRs out there. So it's really hard to break through the noisy inbox. And then, of course, we have cold calling. It's unfortunately just not the same it used to be. Office numbers have kind of gone extinct. And I don't know about you guys, but I never answer calls from any unknown numbers on my cell phone. And then, of course, we have the time it takes and a cadence for a prospect to actually engage in a conversation with you or even just reply back at all. And those are just some of the challenges that I've heard in 2021. So with that being said,
Okay, we want to launch another poll here, guys, just so we can get a better understanding of what your biggest challenge was in 2021, so we can help, get past that in 2022. So I'm just going to launch her here in 1 minute. Okay, you'll see it on your screen shortly. Let us know what you guys think. I'll give it a bit more time for this one because it's a bit more in depth, to say the least. But yeah, actually, I totally agree with you. Every single time I see a call coming through my phone, if I don't get a message or I don't know it, then I will probably not return it or get back to the person, right? So it's always that conversation around the world of is the cold call dead? I know that's very mixed opinions, as some people are diehard cold callers, but others rely on other avenues, right? So it is interesting.
very true.
Okay. Awesome. So starting to fill up here pretty good. It looks like, okay, I'll stop it at the 1 minute mark there. Okay, I'm just going to end the poll here. And I'm going to quickly share the results so everyone can see. So as you can see, leads chased with long cycles of emails and calls was the #1 challenge for most of the people on the call today. However, right behind it, leads cold calling with scripts and timing is off. So kind of like what we just briefly went over. So great to see, and thank you guys for participating. Ashley and Abby, do you have any deeper insights or thoughts on the outcome here?
Abby,
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, this is pretty much in line with what we typically see in working with our prospects and customers. And this is great to kind of tee up for our conversation today. So interesting, lead chasing. We're going to talk a lot about cold calling, scripts, sometime timing not being off and kind of falling in line with the traditional sales playbook. I know cold calling is a really hot topic, as Mikey mentioned, and you guys probably are seeing this on LinkedIn. A lot of people are even cold FaceTiming now, which is very interesting. Not sure what type of success people are seeing with that. With that being said, if we're not answering numbers that we don't know, but yeah, this is interesting, and interesting to see, some of the first couple options. So dropped by AEs who are busy closing deals. And so ultimately, we'll go through some of the traditional playbook aspects with these poll results in mind, and talk through, how we can improve some of these challenges and pain points. All right, Ashley, if you want to take it away.
So the last mile problem is actually what we consider to be 2021's hidden sales problem. The last mile problem is a term that we use to describe the drop off in the funnel when it comes to marketing and sales. Marketing spends all this money and time on generating leads for the sales team. But did you know that a significant amount of the leads that you're spending money on actually aren't getting converted to the sales meeting that we need to happen? There's no one to blame for this, but simply the fact that humans can only handle so many things at one time, and because manual effort simply just takes longer than an automated one. So there's a big gap in the process that allows things to easily slip through for multiple reasons. One, maybe the speed to lead was too long, or two, too much email correspondence and can't lock down a time. Or maybe the lead lists are too long and takes multiple attempts to even get in contact, or they have other priorities, you name it. Question for you, Abby. Being on the sales side of things and having been an SDR, I know the frustration of the last mile problem because I got paid when my meeting would show up to the event that I booked. So if I wasn't booking things, and I definitely wasn't getting paid. But just curious on the marketing side of things, like where do you see the frustration in the last mile problem?
Yeah, great point, Ashley, and great question. So from the marketing side, we invest very heavily monetarily, time, effort, just like the sales team is, right? So all that effort is going into a lot of different campaigns. Once we, are working towards that ROI, so we can, pass the proverbial baton over to the sales team once they've checked all of our qualification boxes. Essentially, we've worked closely with the sales team to collectively identify together, are they a great fit for us from our ICP perspective? Do they fit our ideal customer profile? Are they showing active intent and buying signals? Are they engaging with us on a lot of different channels and that sort of thing? So when we have this perfectly packaged hot lead to pass over to the sales team, we're really excited to see that through and ultimately support the sales team, of course, as much as possible in getting them to pass over that finish line, which in this case, would be a closed won deal. So that last mile problem is definitely a thing. It can be frustrating, for the sales team, just as much from a marketing perspective as well as we're hoping that we're going to give these great leads to you that are a great fit that we can see through and progress through the pipeline very quickly. So, with that being said, that leads us to the next slide here. Everything from the marketing side looks good, right? We have all of these solutions and tools. We have great ABM journeys built. We have great ABM solutions that we can use. We can see the intent. We can see, again, those buying signals. Are they hitting our website? Are they, engaging with us in, different campaigns that we have? Are they visiting our website and popping around to different pages? That sort of thing. And then say we're collecting their information and we have just a couple of form fields, so there's not that barrier to entry, we can enrich that data. So we have essentially, again, this perfectly packaged lead from a marketing, and agreed upon, of course, with the sales team perspective. So once we have this MQL that we can then pass over to the sales team, and that can be through, the example here on the slide, through a CRM like Salesforce or a similar CRM, and we're passing that over to the sales team, and we have this, perfect package. And then it's time for the sales team to engage. So we're going to talk through some of those challenges that the majority of you identified from a lead chasing perspective, and kind of what those steps look like. So from a sales engagement perspective, we have everything kind of seamlessly flowing from a marketing perspective, and then we pass it over to the CRM. So once your sales team, whether it's an SDR or BDR team, or maybe depending on the size of your organization and your sales revenue org, it might go directly over to an AE. But we all have speed to lead. We know how critically important that is, and our SLAs are our service level agreements. And ultimately, most sales teams take those leads from the CRM as they come over from the marketing team, and we've identified it's a hot lead. We know it's imperative to follow up with them right away. And we ultimately end up putting them into, sales engagement sequences. There's a lot of back and forth in a sense. We're seeing anywhere from up to 14 days or so to even get connected with them to get a meeting on the calendar. So with that being said, things are very manual. We want to get to that opportunity stage as soon as possible. So how do we expedite this process, ramp up our pipeline, and then ultimately shorten our sales cycles as much as possible? So again, this is very manual here, comes through picking up the phone, calling right away, emailing. Maybe it's in a sequence of they're getting several emails. It can be anywhere that we've seen from 10 actions scheduled over the course of 14 days. So that's 2 weeks plus with the business days there. And that can be just for that one first connection point, not even to get the meeting booked at that point. It's just that manual kind of ping pong corresponding game. Does Tuesday work? How about Friday? You can't make it, that sort of thing. So we're seeing anywhere in the ballpark of 31% of reps' time is spent just setting up those meetings alone. So that's a pretty significant chunk of time, right? 31%. If you think about, all the valuable time that your sales team could be engaging and prospecting, because these are warm leads coming in. So working the pipeline and the top of the funnel, however we want to phrase that, that's a good chunk of time. And that's going to be a longer barrier to entry and a longer aspect for the sales cycle, of course, to get to that opportunity perspective, and then, to get them qualified, validated, and then hopefully get to that closed won opportunity. So now that that's manual, let's talk through that lead chasing aspect that everyone indicated is a big challenge. So we worked closely with the Heinz marketing organization. We ran a survey to poll technology buyers, and maybe this is a surprise to you guys, maybe not, based on your poll results here. 80% indicated that they are most annoyed by being lead chased. And what we're saying by lead chased is that process of that back and forth. So they're getting emails, calls, that sort of thing. And that's part of what we'll say is the traditional playbook, right? You're getting lots of calls and emails when booking a meeting. And the crazy part here is oftentimes, and likely a lot of you folks are probably in the same boat. An example that I'll give that I've encountered multiple times as a technology buyer. For instance, say I fit all the Banff criteria, right? So I have a budget, I have a timeline, I'm ready to buy. Say I'm vetting a solution. There's a couple different competitors in the space. So of course, I want to do my audit and an assessment. So I will reach out to each of those. And then oftentimes, that barrier to entry can be I'm filling out a form. And then sometimes, it takes a matter of a couple hours, even for a sales rep when I'm super interested and ready to buy at this point, and sometimes even days, right? So we know that that's kind of the kiss of death in a sense if we're not meeting that speed to lead and those SLAs and following up with them as soon as possible, because a competitor, very well might beat us to the punch there. And if I'm on a quick timeline and I like, what they have to provide, it's a similar solution, that can be, a really challenging sticking point for us, right? And I know I've experienced that in many occasions. I'm assuming a lot of you likely have as well. So we know that this is an issue, right? The lead chasing, too many calls and emails. So the secondary aspect of this survey in polling technology buyers, so now that we know that 80% of people are saying this is not something, that we want to lead with, 78% of marketers still said that their biggest fear, with that being said, is lack of or not enough follow-up when passing leads to sales. And the lack of piece is crazy, right? Because, if we're, again, going back to that example that I illustrated earlier, say they've been part of multiple campaigns, based on our tech stack and all the solutions that we have, we know that they're a great fit for us. They're actively showing that they're ready to buy. All things are pointing to a green light and great signals across the board. It's scary to think if they're not followed up with at all. So hopefully that's not the case for most of you, but apparently for a lot of folks that is either that leads are not being followed up on, or if they're not being followed up when quickly enough when being passed over to sales. Mm-hmm. So on that note, pipeline is really hard to generate, right? We all have an extremely tough job. We're in a tough position. We spend a ton of time, and oftentimes there's unforeseen, roadblocks that we might encounter. With that being said, so, it's really important to have a lot of quality pipeline. Sometimes, from a pipeline perspective, we're going to have, different unforeseen, roadblocks and issues that jump into the equation. Everything could be, working smoothly. We're coasting to the point of about to close the deal. Everyone's going to celebrate, that sort of thing. And then bam, we have our champion ends up leaving the organization, which we're likely seeing a lot of with the great resignation that's happening right now. Budget could change, organizational structures, that sort of thing. So we all know how imperative it is, how difficult it is to have quality pipeline, but to continually keep building that as well, from all of our different marketing and sales channels, making sure from a sales perspective that we're actively prospecting all the time. We have tons of marketing campaigns that are helping to generate that pipeline for the revenue organization at large as well. And oftentimes, the quality, say we have some great campaigns, we have a ton of engagement, but maybe they just aren't the right fit. So a lot of challenges here that we're going to dive into. So Ashley is going to share sort of with all of these challenges that were just presented and kind of falling in line with the traditional playbook, what's that next evolution of engagement and how do we solve for that? As Mikey mentioned, so that we can effectively ramp up our pipelines and shorten those sales cycles for everyone.
Yeah, so I think it's been super important that we figure out a way to solve this. And we have. It's actually something that we call the calendar first approach. So that's going to be the unique way we solve the last mile problem. We've actually noticed that putting a calendar invite in front of your prospects quicker improves the lead to meeting conversion rate for a couple different reasons. One, of course, we have that increased speed to lead, which all of us need and want. And it eliminates steps for not only your sales reps, but also your prospect. And we want our first interactions with our potential customers to be seamless and a good customer experience. So we found this to be a really effective way. This is our methodology that we've seen success with. I absolutely recommend trying to offer up a calendar invite on your own, within 3 to 5 days across different lead channels and see some of the success. We've seen success across industries that about 80% of warm leads will actually accept off of the first or the second calendar invite attempt. And we call this the calendar first approach because we've seen significant success with it being the very first thing you do. We absolutely love and believe in sales engagement tools. We use Outreach ourselves. Any declines and no responses, we'd recommend throwing those into your normal outreach sequence to nurture and book a meeting at a later time.
Yeah, and it's just, I think to add to that, it goes back to that lead chasing piece, right? Having for me as a buyer, I don't want the back and forth, right? I want it to be on my terms. I can just choose, I can go, and then I get the time, right? Because right then is when I'm ready to buy, right? So the longer it takes, the more of my competitors get in the door first, and then ultimately there could be a lost opportunity, right? So yeah, I love what you mean there.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, Mikey, I just think back to all the times I was a sales rep and I would finally get somebody to reply back with a time, and then I would go back, or they'd give me a day, and then I would reply back, but oh, it's 2:30 on Tuesday, good, and then they never responded to that, and then kind of before the calendar first, I would probably just keep bothering them and then let it go, but now I'd be oh, they said Tuesday, let's just send a calendar invite and see what happens. So different things you could do with it.
Yeah, totally. And I think even the back and forth too, it's if you're a really busy person, you read it and it's wait, okay. And then you get caught up with other things. And then it's okay, now it's an extra day. I got to send another email. I got to send something else. Okay, now another day, right? So, yeah, I totally, I love it.
Yeah. Perfect. So here is what it looks like. Different triggers can trigger different calendar invites autonomously from the rep that is supposed to handle that meeting. Each of them can have their own set of messaging, routing rules, links to different resources, really whatever you'd like. The image here on the bottom right shows that the calendars are filling up with valuable meetings with no human effort at all. And all the sales reps really have to do is prep and show up for the meetings that have been scheduled for them. With the calendar first approach, this is what your prospect would be experiencing. Calendar invites will have an email accompanying it to further emphasize the reason you're putting time on their calendar. It's a very specific, very tailored to exactly what you want to use that time for. And we've seen great success with it. This example right here, we have a clear call to action and what the value they will get from that meeting will be. So they know why they need to accept that meeting. And then since this meeting will appear also directly on their calendar, it makes it really, really easy for them to say yes or no, or propose a new time based on their availability.
Yeah, so one thing to note, just to dive a little bit deeper into that last part that you said, Ashley. So oftentimes, and you probably see this in a lot of folks on the call as well, when we're sending a calendar invite to them and, to Mikey's point, our inboxes are flooded, it's really quick, we can even do it from our phones to quickly say, okay, yes, I'd like to attend, no, or propose a new time. So oftentimes, for both the end user, the recipient, or the prospect in this case, in that example, they can move on really quickly. And then from a sales perspective, it's super helpful because then we're not chasing them around, for upwards of 2 weeks or so just to get that initial connect. And like Ashley mentioned, maybe you scheduled a day and a time, and then, the day gets away from you and you guys are still going back and forth a couple weeks later. That's a lot of time lost, right? Or if they say no and they decline, typically we'll get a response where, no, now is not a good time because, budget constraints, or, I'll be on vacation for the next 2 weeks, or we're slammed this quarter. So it gives us a clear path forward and an indication in terms of how should we best approach this moving forward? Should we put them into, a sales engagement sequence because it might be, another quarter or two, maybe even. So we want to make sure that we're staying in front of them and we're engaging with them in great thought leadership and, all the best practices there. So that's another added bonus of having, that quick response and then often getting the details with that as well. So declines are not necessarily a bad thing in that sense, because then we know how to move forward one way or another.
Yeah, and then with that point too, it's like now your reps are going to be doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that's selling, right? And it's like, because I think that I read some stat that it's just I can't remember exactly, but it was ridiculous how much time reps spend with just the miscellaneous stuff of exactly this, going back and forth, whatever it may be, and not actually on call selling, right? So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Great point. Again, that frees up so much of their time to do active prospecting. Again, because we do not recommend, just to set the record straight here, that we use this calendar first approach on cold leads. So this is warm leads, that have the engagement, great fit, all that type of stuff. But to Mikey's point, yeah, that excellent. In terms of, time saving, there's, a whole host of different activities that the sales reps could be engaging in and having, valuable communications and, making sure that they're prepping for an upcoming meeting and, preparing for discovery calls and, all the great best practices there, instead of spending this, back and forth game, which can end up being a significant amount of time. All right, so that leads us to, now that we addressed the challenges and some of the issues that we've seen in terms of lead chasing and some of these other areas on the traditional playbook, how do we become wildly successful in 2022 using this calendar first engagement? So we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive now that we've introduced what calendar first is. And again, that's what we recommend as the first point of engagement, hence the name there from a calendar perspective. And then again, if we get a decline, as we can see here on the screen, then we can put them into, an outreach, cadence and that sort of thing as well. All right, so it looks like it's time for another poll. Mikey, if you can help us out with this one, please.
You got it. Okay, guys. So we're going to do the third one here, and it's we're going to be asking you guys about the lead channel. So if you could choose increase your pipeline using one lead channel, which would it be? I'm just going to go ahead and launch this guy, and I'll leave that out for about a minute or so and get a better understanding of how we're feeling. APM internet intent. Nice. Okay, here we go. Expansions with current customers. Paid search. It's a pretty even, or relatively even spread.
I was going to say, I feel like it'd be hard to pick one particular one because
True.
we all want to increase all of our lead channels,
Well, it's the exactly. Taking the multi-channel approach too. You gotta use it all, right?
Omni-channel's the way to go.
Omni-channel is the way to go.
Absolutely.
Okay. Sweet. Okay, so I'll just end the poll there. Thank you guys for all of your answers. I appreciate it. And now I'm just gonna go ahead and share the results. It looks like our winner is webinars and events. Hopefully next year we get to do a lot more in-person stuff, so that'll be exciting. But yeah, what do you, Ashley? What do you think about the results here?
Yeah, I know we were going to bring it up a little bit later, but this actually really excites me for particular like the webinar and events. Abby, should I just tell my story now?
Yeah, sure, go for it. You just
so me and Abby luckily got to go to an in-person trade show like 2 weeks ago, or I guess it was a month ago at this point, in Vegas. And it was the first time that I've been able to try the calendar first approach at a trade show. And when I say it was like game changing, it was actually game changing, because like the normal process of having to scan everyone's card and asking awkwardly, can I scan your card? And then a few days later, or whenever the trade show scanner decides to release that list to you, then you get this list of everybody you met or people you walked by, and then you have to call them and then getting in contact with them. And they're like, I don't remember you. I met 1,000 other people. So it's so frustrating. So this time around, what we did was we had just like a landing page on my phone where basically all I had to do was collect their name and their email. And then what would happen, it was automatically send them a calendar invite. So by the time they checked their email on the spot, they already had a calendar invite waiting for me for like the following week, or allow 7 to 10 days for them to get back after travels. And it says, hey, like, the exact messaging, like, met you at the show, we talked about this, like using this time to dive in further and show you a full demo. And that way, when they got back to their computer, they had the calendar invite already waiting for them. And we increased speed to lead. So all the other people they met, I already got in front of all them. So it was really, really cool.
Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot. It's like you said, Ashley, when you're at a conference, you're just meeting so many people throughout the whole time, right? And I remember even as a rep, forgetting some of the people that I met, being like, hey, that could have been a great one. So I can only imagine the buyers walking around and everyone there trying to sell multiple different products. So that's really cool how that, I can see how that would have been extremely successful.
Yeah, it was very cool.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Ashley. So kind of taking it one step further, past that example that Ashley just illustrated. So these are some of the results that we're seeing with this calendar first approach and kind of the new different playbook. So you can see from a pipeline growth perspective. So the middle column, or I guess the second from the left, is our typical approach, our traditional playbook in a sense, if you will. So the SDRs plus the sales engagement. So baking in, whether it's 2 to 3 week cadence, and kind of, exactly what Ashley just illustrated. So from a timing perspective, it's going to be a little bit longer there, but still, pretty impressive results across the board for all those different channels. And so the calendar first, you can see, and then the pipeline growth column on the right-hand side, we're seeing our customers anywhere from 2 to 3x to 5x, 5 times the pipeline growth in a lot of different situations. And a lot of that, again, kind of to what we just touched on, is a timing perspective as well. So getting in front of them from a calendar first perspective, and a key aspect of that is having a tailored message at the right time, right? And then we can clearly illustrate there's an agenda in the calendar invite that's speaking to the value that we'll provide. So it's very clear and it's very timely. Again, it's not cold. So, it'd be based on like the events, like Ashley mentioned. Okay, so, from a speed to lead perspective, they're literally getting the calendar invite and the accompanying email on their phone within a minute when they're at the trade show. So they get to see that experience firsthand. And so that way they don't have to worry, if they were interested in meeting with us, about waiting, give or take a couple days, sometimes a week. As marketers, we're getting those lead lists. We're trying to work through them as quickly as possible to get them into, those nurture campaigns and follow up. But we can do this exponentially faster. And so this is how we're seeing some of that growth that's occurring along with that, and the timely messaging. As Ashley mentioned, we're seeing 80% accept rates within an average of, I think it's 1.4 days using this approach. And so events, for example, we can have everything set and ready to go. As soon as an event occurs, we can launch the follow-up campaign. It's going to put a meeting invite on their calendar directly after. And we're seeing these results, and the success as a result of that, because we're staying in front of them, and it's not taking a couple days to weeks to follow up on that. So that's huge from a timing perspective as well, in conjunction with making it a very simple, straightforward process for them to say, yes, I'm absolutely interested in taking a meeting, or no, I'm not at this time, for this reason, or, proposing a new time that will work for both parties.
Abby, I got a quick question for you. From Eduardo in our audience here. He's wondering if you have any stats on the percentage of calendar first invites declined versus accepted from the first time it was sent.
I don't know declines. I can get back to you on that, definitely, from like a customer average perspective. So we actually use Chronologic, and we refer to it as drinking our own champagne. So I know from our stats specifically, we fall directly in line with, typically we see 80% of the acceptance happening on the first invite that goes out. From a decline perspective, I'd say our average for what we're typically seeing from an accept rate for each is going to vary, slightly based on the lead source here. We see anywhere in the ballpark of like, again, 30% on some of these, the hosted events, intent, anywhere 10% and that sort of thing. And then declines we typically see maybe in the ballpark of like 10% or so, I'd say, on those. It varies based on the lead source, but it's fairly low across the board.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Abby. That's some pretty amazing stats, to say the least.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And, again, this isn't for cold outreach. So these folks are engaged, and so that's where we're really seeing some of the success, which I'll walk through some examples here as well and kind of illustrating some of that. So before we dive into those, really big on kind of ditching the status quo. So Latine, the CMO of Sixth Sense, actually one of our customers, you mentioned in her book, ditch the traditional strategies, tactics, technologies that are no longer working to deliver breakthrough results, which we're firm believers of. So hopefully moving into the new year and, shaking up the status quo, hopefully everybody else is having that same mindset as well. So a couple examples here that we can draw. Thank you for that question in terms of some of what we're seeing from a results perspective. So this example here is actually from a sales hacker event that we did back in January. It was beyond quota. So follow up for that, and Sales Hacker, have been awesome to work with, great communities. Thank you guys again for joining us today. We're so happy to have you here with us. So following up from that event, we ended up booking 131 meetings, and that was over the course of 5 days. And that resulted in 500,000 or $500,000 in pipeline. So again, from a ramp perspective, getting all of these accepted meetings on your sales rep's calendar and automating this process so all they have to do is show up to the meetings that are already booked can be done super quickly, and then you can ramp up your pipeline super fast with that being said. So huge wins across the board with that. And then one of our customer examples, a very large enterprise organization, IT services company. So whether you're a large sales team or a small sales team, 2 examples, and we'll send out this deck as well, so you can see at the bottom, you can actually listen into, kind of all the nitty gritty details of how they've seen success and how they executed their campaign, as well as the full case study. But kind of the Cliffs Notes high level version here is that their larger team, which was about 200 reps for the inside sales, they ended up booking 800 meetings in 1 week. So this is a unique example because it can be used across a lot of different capacities all through your funnel and sales stages. So for this one in particular, this is existing customer relationships that they had, and they ended up booking, I believe, millions in pipeline and closed won revenue, I believe, as well, from these two examples that you can see here, and they mentioned that typically, that would take weeks to be able to even get anywhere close to getting that amount of meetings booked on their calendar. And then the small team example as well, with only 6 reps, and this is a field seller example, they booked 150 meetings over the course of 1 month. So again, whether you're a small team or a very large team, there's a lot of different use cases that come into play here. With these examples that are illustrated, normally it would take, again, 1 quarter, even potentially, this particular team had mentioned, to book that amount of meetings. So instead of waiting a full quarter for all of that to come full circle and see the ROI on those campaigns and efforts there, they're able to do so in a significantly shorter period of time. So just a couple of examples, with that being said. And then, again, here is an example, kind of a snapshot of Chronologic's customers to date who are using this playbook and this calendar first methodology and seeing success. So a lot of different companies from varying different sizes, different industries, and a lot of different use cases there. And then Jason Yang, who is the CEO of Dialpad, we've had speak with us on a couple different occasions at different conferences, and he said he was mentioning over the course of a couple different conversations that we've had, how teams are spending millions of dollars, companies of his size investing in marketing and sales processes to drive leads. And ultimately, from an ROI perspective, those are all tying back to the meeting, right? Whether that be, the full circle and the full funnel approach, all the different sales stages. I saw a couple people from CX and, a couple different from the customer success side. So this is definitely an area that we're seeing success from as well, from a sales perspective, from prospects all the way through, again, that previous example from customer relationships that you already have established, and whether that be QBRs and that type of thing, staying in front of them, seeing a lot of great success with this calendar first approach. All right, Mikey, so I think we have a little bit of time if we have any more questions. If not, I think this is where we can end today's discussion.
I have a couple questions for you. Ashley, I'm gonna gear this one first. Also, thank you, Abby and Ashley, so much for this. This is amazing information. I can't wait to start doing it as well. So thank you so much. I learned a ton and can't wait to show my results and let you guys know how I succeed moving forward. But Ashley, I wanted to just ask you, I know you, Abby, you mentioned a bunch that you wouldn't recommend taking the calendar first approach for any cold leads. Ashley, have you ever, tried and seen any success with, reaching out to cold prospects and booking meetings through the calendar first approach?
Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't done too much on the ice cold side of things. I've done it on the intent data, so a little cold, but a little warmer. I've seen great success with the intent data. But as for cold, I don't really have anything to report, just simply because I'm so busy with the meetings that I have. I'm not actively prospecting every single day because I simply just don't have the time, which I would say is a good thing.
Yeah.
From a sales rep. So no, I don't have any fun stats for you on cold data.
Cool. We just got a question from Phil. Could you use this tool in social channels, or is it only email? Yeah, you could definitely. Yeah, that's very interesting. That's kind of a use case that's a little outside of the box. So ultimately, we can set up triggers using Chronologic so that you can still automate processes. So one key piece with that being said, so thank you for asking this great question. You can have a quick form, and behind the form, you can trigger a type of Chronologic campaign. So for instance, say that on social, whether that's a content download or if it's a bottom of the funnel type request, a demo request, something along those lines. So again, kind of expediting that process exponentially. You can put a calendar invite on that particular person's calendar as soon as they fill out that form, and all you need is their email really for that. You can have a custom
custom tailored invite already sent out in a matter of a minute or less. So a lot of different use cases with that being said, and that way you can take out the speed to lead from a human aspect. So what we talked about earlier, say an SDR or BDR, say they have an SLA of 10 minutes and maybe you're getting that at 3 o'clock in the morning. I would hope that they're not able to answer that live at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? So you can automate that process directly for them. So there's a lot of different use cases from a triggering perspective behind a form on that note. So yes, absolutely, you can do that. And that's a great example.
Awesome. Love that. So I got a couple more here for you guys before I let everyone go. But do you think this approach of, the traditional tedious approach of, going back and forth, trying to build that relationship via email rather than just getting onto a calendar, do you think if teams that aren't taking this kind of calendar first approach moving forward are going to be beaten a lot more by their competitors? Do you think it's something that teams need to adopt in order to stay competitive, especially in the growing world of SaaS technology? What do you think on that? Do you think it's going to be kind of a mandatory process moving forward?
Well, we're firm believers. We definitely think so. Ashley, I'd love to get your perspective from a sales standpoint on that question.
Honestly, I would say yes. It's just, keeping up with what everyone else is kind of doing. If everyone else has this calendar first approach and their speed to lead is literally 1 minute and your speed to lead is even 5 minutes, well, you just lost 4 minutes and you probably lost a deal. So if it's the holiday and it's the weekend and you still haven't followed up yet a calendar first approach has already booked a demo on somebody's calendar, you're kind of stuck in, what do we want to call it, the olden days or the traditional ways or whatnot. But it's definitely not a bad thing to try out. Everybody that I recommend trying just their own manual calendar first, they're like, oh my God, we've already seen quick success. I'm like, perfect.
Yeah.
Mikey, that's a great point. With this screen, actually, that's a perfect segue with what Ashley just mentioned. So we have a link, the first one here, that's calendar first methodology. You can go to that link on our website and you can try out that. And we strongly encourage everyone to, a little bit more manual if you're not using Chronologic to automate everything on the back end, but you can absolutely utilize this calendar first, to Ashley's point, on your own. So that link will give you ultimately a blueprint for your sales team to follow and kind of walk through all those best practices. And some of them we mentioned, having value statements, making sure it's timely, kind of how to structure that calendar invite for success and that sort of thing. But yeah, we strongly encourage you to go ahead and give that a try, say 2 or maybe 3 to 5 days out. And then see how well that works for you. And again, you're going to get a quick response, whether they accept, they don't, or they'll let you know, hey, Tuesday doesn't work, I'm proposing Thursday, but see how it works. Yeah, we'd love to hear feedback if you do take us up on that. And then, of course, there's another link here for a demo. We'd love to talk through use cases as well, of course. With that example, the question from a social perspective that came up and walking through kind of some of the challenges and different lead sources and channels and things like that, where the calendar first methodology could be a game changer for your team, moving forward.
And can it stand alone, or must it be integrated, through a sales engagement platform like Outreach?
It can definitely stand alone. So you can use CSV lists that you import directly. So I guess, it's a 2-part. So yes, it can stand alone from an integration perspective and triggering, like some of those examples that we use where there's a form involved. It's definitely advantageous to have an Outreach or a marketing automation platform or something like that you can integrate to if you want to do that trigger real-time calendar invite.
Got it. Awesome. Well, that's all from me. Thank you both so much for taking the time to bless us with your knowledge and experience. And we thank you all for taking the time, an hour of your day to hang out with us today. So again, if you guys have any questions that come up in the next however long, please go find Abby and Ashley on LinkedIn, send them a request. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. But without further ado, again, thank you both so much for being here and spending the time to give back to the community. And you know what? I'm really excited to do it again soon.